Hi everyone, welcome to the Module 12 wrap-up video. Um, we'll go through this as quick as possible since I didn't communicate to you guys effectively that you only had to do one part, so I'll discuss both parts of the journal assignment. With that, the first part was the scenario was you're an intelligence professional working for the Facebook cybersecurity team. With this, you're charged with monitoring the WhatsApp application, which is an encrypted messenger service owned by Facebook, and it's also ran by Facebook. And you're to ensure that it remains encrypted and ensure you secure the privacy for all users. We use this scenario following the London 2017 attacks when Khalid Masood killed 4 people in a jihadist attack. Subsequently, the FBI comes to you for assistance, and the question is, do you have a duty to help the FBI, or do you have a stronger duty to protect the privacy of all users? And there was quite a wide range of disparity among the answers to this question through you guys. So we'll go over general consensus of those answers here in a minute. So finding a balance between security and privacy is always a delicate issue, just to start off. And again, this was quite evident by the wide range of answers you guys provided. So what wasn't really made clear in the scenario, and many of you may not even have realized or didn't indicate that you realized that Khalid was actually killed by the police after the attack. Obviously, this can change the context of everything that we're discussing, but at the same time, didn't want you guys to look at that. I wanted you guys to think about it as if he was a more morally significant being. Or is he? Did he relinquish his right to privacy because of this attack? Did he give up his right to life? The police seem to think so since they killed him. But imagine for a second he wasn't killed and he's actually alive. So you look at this from 2 angles. You look at his rights, and you look at the precedent that it could set for decisions for society as a whole. Then we look at the claim rights of the attacker, the claim rights of the FBI, and the claim rights of society. A lot of you brought up moral rights. In addition to deontological ethics, which was good, and some of you tried to discuss Kantian concept, which was also excellent. I thought there were some themes there that were very relevant. I know many of you are hesitant to use Kant's theory because of its general inflexibility, but I asked you to use deontological ethics because I wanted you guys to examine it from the position of what is my duty? But some of you dug into Kantian ethics and concluded from the categorical imperative and the idea of universality. Can you make a law that states that you can invade the privacy of individuals for the sake of national security? And just about all of you argued that you cannot do that. And privacy violations are something that everyone would agree to be universal law. Some of you stated that protecting privacy could be a universal law. But most of you who are not comfortable with Kantian ethics would follow that up with that there must be exceptions for extreme situations. And most of you focused on that, which is good. In this case, the attacker has been identified and subsequently killed. Even if he had just been caught, as far as we know, there's no evidence of another attack, although there's a concern for it. So many of you stated it was not ethical for any privacy violations to take place because there was no imminent threat. So I'm going to look at this from 2 different perspectives based off your guys' answers, the class consensus. So first, you had those of you that favored privacy above all else. And then there was those of you who favored national security above all else. And then there was a few of you that kind of fell somewhere in the middle. First, looking at any form of aiding the FBI or some type of backdoor strategy, those who took a privacy rights of individuals approach, as far as this is what you valued, you guys valued this most and would not assist the FBI. Your reasons were, one, that it would set a really bad precedent, and two, if you did use some sort of backdoor access, it would weaken the entire system, and potentially it could put the company out of business. The public would lose faith in the company's ability to keep information secure and private, and there's just a lot of second and third order effects that could happen from a business perspective. So that was the second one. Some of you argue that only a terrorist or someone doing something criminal would be encrypting messages, but others argue that no, it's not the case. There's a lot of people have banking information or information about their kids, family, whatever that they want to keep secure. And if you use some sort of backdoor like Apple did in the San Bernardino case, you end up causing some instability within the system and you degrade the ability to protect that privacy. On the other hand, others argued if Apple had actually tried to help, then maybe they would have not had to go to an outside hacker, and Apple could have mitigated the damage on what was collected. One person made a good analogy or a great point that Facebook is not only used by US citizens, but Facebook's used all over the world. In fact, they threw out a statistic that US only makes up for about 20% of Facebook users. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, as so not only could providing the information to the FBI have US implications, but it could have global implications as well. So just another thing to consider. A student in a prior semester mentioned the idea of the FBI having to control a company's product, such as an encrypted messenger service. They compared it to sending packages opened through the postal system, so you can see what's inside, or they can see what's inside, which I thought was a pretty good analogy. The same student, though, and many others argued, though, that it would be okay for Apple to unlock devices. So, and then one more example, another student in a prior semester compared it to, this was actually this semester. One student compared it to kind of like patient-client privilege or confidentiality agreement between a patient and a doctor. So if someone was seeing a therapist, that therapist is prohibited from discussing or releasing any information pertaining to their patient. Another good example. So moving on, in this case study, it's not exactly clear what the FBI was trying to get WhatsApp personnel to open. Some of you touched on that and said there would be a difference for you whether or not the owner of the material being collected was WhatsApp or when it was the individual user. If WhatsApp owned the content, then it would be acceptable for them to turn it over. This is kind of based on the user agreements that you sign up front whenever you get consent to, download or sign up for an application, which I think just about every social media platform has. Looking at the next part of it, for me, and only a few of you highlighted on this as a concern, but the idea of using subpoenas or warrants that most of you would assist the FBI or some type of judicial action. Only like 3 or 4 of you have mentioned this, but many of you changed your outlook if you did have a warrant or subpoena. If the FBI had gone through the trouble to get proper authority by having a warrant or subpoena, now you said you would have the just cause to collect the information. So we don't have to worry if they're just, the FBI that is, if they're just fabricating the importance of finding the information so they can take some shortcuts while doing their job or whatever. So now with a warrant, the information, the importance of the need for this information is it's then elevated, which again, to me, that's a pretty significant consideration. Those on the other side of the argument said you should do anything that you can to help the FBI. Even some of you on that perspective stated you should still get a warrant to demonstrate the necessity of collecting the information. However, if the suspect is dead, as stated before, and there's not an imminent threat, there's other ways the FBI can go about to gather the information they need, as opposed to jeopardizing the encryption of an entire company. So some of you focus on the potential that if there is a future attack, so we need to gather all the information so we can gather all the information as we can and as quickly as we can. Student in the other course also suggested temporarily unencrypting the messages. The student had a pretty good cyber background, so he's familiar with this process, but he said temporarily unencrypting messages college sent, so the FBI had just a window in which they could gather the information. This is also a pretty good idea, without going through a backdoor channel and without mitigating the company's encryption process. So these are just some alternative solutions that are not last resort and give us an opportunity or other methods that we can gather the intelligence we need. So with that, here's some questions for you to think about in regards to the part 1 scenario. If we deem that it's ethical for whatever purposes and whatever methods that we obtain the messages of Khalid Masood, whether or not he's dead or alive, then how do we determine the ethicality of collecting on his known associates? So for example, if we only open his particular messages and links, if that leads to someone else, is he communicating with other nefarious individuals? How do we determine if it's ethical to collect on those individuals to see maybe they're involved as well, if there's any known conspirators, or to decide it's not a legitimate target at all and he's just texting his grandmother or something? So overall, this was a very broad case, as you could tell, and I intentionally left it ambiguous because as intelligence professionals, we're never going to have a full picture, especially in applying intelligence ethics. So it's your job and our job to decide whether I need to get more information and cannot act until I have that additional information, and I need to find it and I need to paint a more clear picture for myself. Or lives are on the line, I need to act right away even without the full picture, but I need to make the best decision possible with the knowledge you have. So those are some considerations for part 1. Moving on to part 2. This was a little more succinct, if you will. The thoughts on part 2 ran a wide spectrum between having complete support for the privatization of intelligence to adamant disagreement with it on the other side. So most of you chose the middle ground, and it's just probably somewhere where I lie, advocating for the use of privatized intelligence to be used in opposition. Research for those who opt in the game of holding positions of power within our government, but not necessarily for researching those who do not opt in, such as the victims of Harvey Weinstein. Most of you drew lines between the use of privatized intelligence through open source information and that it's obtained through more intrusive means, focusing on the importance of ensuring the law is upheld in pursuit of such intelligence. The great support for the use of privatized intelligence was that it can be used to keep the public informed and to hold public officials accountable. Some of you even argued that if collaboration can take place between governmental agencies and private intelligence firms, it might improve the intelligence picture overall. And then others argued that our governmental intelligence community would not agree to this kind of information sharing and would be better off if they could at least agree to share information within all departments of the governmental intelligence community. The greatest downside, and I commented on this in most of your journals, the greatest downside of the privatization of intelligence that some of you discussed was lack of oversight, objectivity, and accountability for these organizations, and as well as their propensity to follow political and financial objectives with biased agendas. And lastly, their potential to interfere with national intelligence objectives. So with that, that's the end of the video. If you guys have any questions about the week, feel free to send me a Canvas email or comment below. And good luck on the final couple weeks. Talk to you soon. Bye.